Happy Sunday and welcome back to the 6-inch Summer Squares series. For this block, we'll work on building embroidery stitches, which will also be a great time to work on complementary colors and blends. So I've chosen 3 hand-dyed fabrics with the Colorado landscape in mind. So I've got green grass, purple mountains, and a sunset sky. I hand-stitched these 2.5 by 6.5 inch strips together, and I have my background block. Of course, you can machine stitch these as well. If you want a solid background, simply mark the lines so that the middle section is 2 inches and the 2 outer sections are 2.25 inches, keeping in mind the seam allowances on the top and the bottom. In either case, you'll want to stabilize the back with fusible batting or stabilizer. Here I'm using Quilter Select Print and Piece Fuse Light. This makes a great surface to work on and will hold your stitches with minimal puckering. Next, you'll want to gather some threads. I keep this recycled bin full of threads just for such an occasion. If you'd like to learn how to make this, visit the Scraps or Bust series here on the Quilt as Inspired YouTube channel. I've selected some potential threads of different weights and then gathered some beads that I might use. I may not use them all and I may add to them as I work, but I think it's a good start. So I keep them all in one place in this crocheted bowl for which the pattern is in the works, and now I'm all ready to go. Okay, now that we've got our playground ready to go, we're going to start our stitching. So we're going to work with a little bit more accuracy this time. So we're going to start with some double mirroring fly stitching between the mountain and the sky. And I'm just going to mark with a chalk pencil 1/4 inch on either side of the seam line. Now you can see I have a Frixion pen here. I don't want to make such a major mark with the Frixion just because when you iron the Frixion away, the ink will disappear, but that white residue will stay behind. So I'm going to do chalk this time, because on these dark fabrics it will show. Now in between the double fly stitch, I'm going to put in some beads. So we'll start with that. And this time I am going to mark with the Frixion pen just because they're little marks and they're going to be covered up by the bead pretty much. So keeping in mind always your 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to start 1/2 inch away from the edge and just make little marks here, every 1/2 inch, so I know where to put the bead. So I've got my little bead markers. I've got a single strand of DMC floss on the needle, but I've doubled it up and knotted it at one end. So all I'm going to do now is just start by stitching these little guys on. And here all you really have to worry about is which way the bead is facing. So I think I'm going to face it. I'm going to put the needle in really close to that orange edge there. Maybe that's even too close. I want the bead to sit right along that edge. So I'm just putting my needle in. And then I'm going right directly across from it, right into that seam line. This is my little sky, so I want to have a little bit of blue in there. Blue is the complementary color to orange, so I think it'll look great. So how I remember complementary colors, not by any means am I a shooty hoops person or a sports person of any nature, but I grew up in Minnesota, so I always remember purple and yellow are complementary because of the Minnesota Vikings, and blue and orange are complementary because of the Broncos, and red and green are complementary because of Christmas. So that's how I always remember. And then just go through the bead twice just to get it solidified in place. You may have to just adjust the beads a little bit if they're not sitting the way you want to, but this way the beads are sitting straight up and all I can see is the blue bead. Now as far as what color thread, so in applique, you always want to match the thread to the applique piece that you're working with. But in beading, if you don't want to see a lot of the thread, you're going to want to match the thread to the background. So here I'm just using purple, so that really what stands out is the blue. And as you can see with that stabilizer, it's just a nice surface to work on. Okay, so then what we're going to do is bring a fly stitch down on both sides. So in working with the purple, I'm using that same DMC floss multicolor that I did for the iris mohawk, and I'm using 3 strands here. So I'm going to do that color, bringing the orange down into the purple, plus it has yellow in it, so I think it's going to look really nice as that complementary color. And then I'm going to do purple up on the top, and then I'll add beads to the fly stitch, so it goes like this. And this I'm just going to eye up because it's pretty easy to eye up in between 1/2 inch marks. So at 1/4 of an inch here, I'm going to come up, and then right in the center of those 2 beads, go down. So before you pull your loop through, pop the needle out just below that bead, right on your chalk line, and catch the loop. And then I'm going to put a purple bead and maybe an orange, although I don't know if these orange are going to fit over my needle. Nope, they don't. So I had to dig, and I found my big eye beading needles, and these things are really great because the whole needle opens and they're sharp on both ends. So you can put your floss or your thread or whatever you're working with, and then have a tiny little needle where the beads, the smaller beads, would actually fit through. They're really great. You can find them at the big box stores. Just be gentle with them because they're real bendy. It can be a challenge to find the right size needle where the eye is big enough for your thread, but small enough to fit through the tiniest of beads. So big eye beading needle, and they come in lots of different sizes. I always have so many needles just with me, and I just have them in my pin cushion and pick the right one for the job. Okay, and so then just find that edge again, and then halfway between these 2 beads, I'm going to insert the needle. Okay, and then just leave your loop kind of hanging there and long. These are a little bendier, but it's worth it if you can fit your thread and your beads. So just below the bead, come out, catch the loop. I'm going to put on a size 8 purple and a size 12 orange. Okay, and then just to make sure that your bead sits right up against, just push it with your needle before you enter into your fabric. Okay, just come out the same place. Maybe just put your needle in between the beads like this so you can eye it up, and then you'll know right where to insert it. Just be as close as you can. You want to have a couple of these big eye beading needles on hand because they do break easy. Usually what I try to do is just put my hand really close to the end of the needle when I pop it through the fabric so it doesn't bend on me as much. And of course, if you don't have them or you're not feeling like running out and get them, just use a bigger bead on the end there. You don't have to use that tiny one. Be super pretty with 1 bead or 2 of the same size or what have you. Okay, and then same thing on the other side, but we're just going to switch it up and use the purple thread. So you're going to want to insert, come up in the needle in the same spot as one of these yellow or whatever color you're using, and then go down. So just at the point where those 2 meet, insert it back down into the seam. And then same thing on your line and just below your center bead there. Then I'll use the same beads as I did before. But of course you could mix it up. And just push the beads up with your needle. And right at the base of your last bead, just insert the needle back into the back. So we're making little diamonds with those beads in the middle of. And then just work that all the way across. And keep your lines for now, because we're going to use them and work in between these diamonds here. And as you can see, this beading needle is getting pretty mangled just because it's like it's very flexible. So again, just when you're poking the needle in and out of the fabric, just keep your hand real close, not up here because it's just going to bend. Okay, and then just work that all the way across. Okay, so I've got my little diamond design finished. I'm going to make another line just above it. So I'm 1.5 inches plus another 1/8 of an inch here. Just going to take my chalk pencil, make a little line. And then I kind of want to bring in some of this brighter orange, accentuate the sky a little bit. So this time I'm going to work down into the work. So I'm going to work from this line right in between the beads to the line that I drew previously. So I've got 2 strands of a really bright orange DMC floss coming up on the line, just eyeing it up in between these 2 beads here. I'm going to work a lazy daisy. So I'm going to go right back into the same hole and find the line right in between those beads, so it'll line up with where everything matches right there. Come up on the line and then just make sure your thread is behind. And I think I will go down, might go down right in that cross there. I think I'll scooch all the threads and just work over the cross. Come back to the base of your daisy and then make another one and come out maybe right between those beads there. On this side of the bead line so that the beads don't get all funky. And then right in back into the base. Come up right in between those 2 beads and then lock it in place. So make sure you're over the loop, but on this side of the bead thread. So just work that all the way down. Okay, and then you can put a little half one on the sides here. So you would just come down and do 1 angled in. And I think the tops of these are just screaming for a bead. So I've chosen these little red teardrop beads, but crystals, anything would do. So what I'm doing is with the same color thread I've got here, I'm coming up maybe 1/16 of an inch away from the base of the lazy daisy stitching we did. And then I'm just very simply putting on this little teardrop and then going right down into the center of the center lazy daisy. And then come up through that hole again. These tend to want to flop around a little bit, so we're going to want to secure those with 2 stitches. And incidentally, if you're watching and you want to try some of these things and you don't have a lot of beads, definitely visit my Etsy store. I've got a couple bead kits in different colorways, and it's got the size 8 seed beads and some 6. Some of the kits have teardrops, some of them have metallic beads, so it's a kit that would allow you to do a lot of different things. And then I also have thread kits on there as well. You know, and just stitching in this direction, you can ensure that you're going right down into that center lazy daisy. So it's got to be a pretty small needle. These bead holes are pretty small. Up again through the bead hole. And then down in that same spot. Okay, I am loving these little jelly beads. They're just little teardrops. Loving it. Okay, so I think for the last thing I want to do up here is just extend maybe a little bit in between the beads. So with blue, just to reference that again, this is our sky after all, we're going to work extended French knots. So what that looks like is I'm coming up in the center of the bead, but I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch of space right here. And I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. Then make sure this thread goes under the needle, and just so that this line lays parallel with that daisy stitch, I'm inserting the needle on the line and pulling my thread just to ensure my knot is tight. So what you want to do is just hold everything in place, pull really slowly, and then you've got a little knot right there. Come up in the same place. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thread goes under, running parallel to that daisy and inserting your needle on the line. Okay, and then maybe one more coming right out of the center. Up to maybe there. What I'm going to do is mark another line just so this stays consistent. So what I do is I'll just look and see where I think that knot should go, you know, maybe a little bit higher up here. So I'm 1.25 inches from the edge, and I'm just going to draw another chalk line just so I have a marker place to stop. There we go. And then incidentally, to get rid of these lines, just take a little Q-tip with water and just kind of erase them. Easy peasy. Okay, let's try a French knot up here, directly above. So I'll hold the needle up and I'll pull the knot tight so I know where this guy is going to end up before I pull it through. And then I just insert it and hold everything tight, and then slowly pull it through. And this is 2 strands of DMC floss in a light blue that goes with these beads. Yeah, that'll look pretty and lacy. It wants to lift up, so I may couch that down with some yellow. Not sure yet, but let's just do another grouping and we'll see what it looks like. So you can see I'm using the surface as my stabilizer. And then when coming up from the center, insert the needle straight up. And then you can see I'm pulling the knot and holding it in place so it just behaves. Okay, and then the last thing I think I want to do up here is maybe surround this little blue French knot with more French knots or maybe even some beads. So I'm going to pull the knot to make that line stay really straight, and then put a little stitch just right under it to hold it in place. Okay, and then come up again. I think I'm just going to surround this little French knot with some tiny little beads. Make little flowers out of it. It's going to take a minute, but I think it's going to be really cute. And I'm using yellow thread just to get some lightness in there. I don't mind seeing the thread, just adds to the flower a little bit. So I'm kind of thinking 5 beads will be great. And these are so little, and this is a size 12 thread, that I'm not going to go through every bead twice. Once is plenty. I think these will stay put really nicely. You know, I was going to do 5, but I actually think that looks pretty cute. So I might just stop there. So I've got a little yellow stitch under here, and then one on the right side, one on the top, one on the left side. I like that. And these are size 12 seed beads. So needless to say, I have a tiny little needle. Curious as to see what it'll look like if I put 3 little stripes and couch this thread down. Just for some extra interest. So maybe just 3 little stripes. I like it. I think it's a sweet little detail, so I'm going to do it. Yeah, that's cute. Even the littlest tiny stitches can add the greatest detail. Okay, so before I decide to do anything else down here, I'm going to work on this line, just see how close it gets, and then we can make decisions. I mean, this looks like a good finished edge to me, so I might not do anything else, but I'm not sure yet. Designing as we go here. So down here I want to bring in some of the green up into the purple, and we're going to work a Cretan stitch. So what I'm going to do, I've marked my 1/4 inch lines on either side, and then just to get the spacing just right, I'm going to, on this 1/4 inch line, just mark every 1/2 inch, but starting at the 1/4 inch here. And I am using a Frixion pen just for these little dots. Even though that white residue may remain, I'm going to stitch right through it, so it won't matter. Okay, so every 1/2 inch here, and then I'm also going to do every 1/2 inch here, but I'm going to offset it, so it's going to be like in between. So on this seam, I'll go every 1/2 inch, but starting at the 1/2 inch edge there. And that way when we stitch, we're going to alternate. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so for the Cretan stitch, we're going to come up at this first dot here. And again, this is 2 strands of DMC floss. You know, I just love me some DMC. And then we're going to go up to this dot right here. So insert the needle into the dot and then come up halfway between that and the center line. So not all the way to the center line. And then just make sure your thread is underneath. And then at this line, same thing. Go down and perpendicular to your seam line, but halfway up, making sure the thread is under. Okay, and then just follow that path all the way down, just always making sure your thread is touching your fabric and your needle's working over your thread to catch that little loop there. Okay, so that's worked all the way across. So I've switched to same color but 3 strands of DMC floss because I want to do little trees on every other Cretan stitch post. So I've cut out a little leaf here, little leaf shape, super easy. Nothing crazy, and I'm just going to try to line the point of it up with that orange bead and then work an outline. And we'll do a little fly stitch leaf. Put some little trees on it, always channeling Bob Ross. Okay, so there's my outline. So of course knot it on the back and start not directly on the point, but just about 1/8 of an inch down on the left-hand side. Then bring this up to the point and come down in the center. So where you're coming out of, you're inserting the needle into the center and then coming out in the middle of the stem, but it's extending past where that is. So that's right there in the halfway point. And then just make sure that your thread is underneath and catch the loop. And then to finish out the fly stitch, just make a little tiny stitch just below it in the center. So it's just a series of little fly stitches. And I'm just trying to keep as consistent as I can as far as the space between these. At that same height there. Go down on the right side, but then just come up at the bottom of your little stab stitch. Your stem of your fly stitch. I'm trying not to disturb those threads there. And then another little stab stitch down the center. And then stitch bottom. I might make that center stitch a little longer, just a hair, so that my leaves, my branches, can keep angling up. And then again, just watch your spacing. And then of course your fly stitches will get progressively smaller, closer together as you work down the stem. And then just stab it into the top of that Cretan stitch. And I may add some beads, we'll see what happens later, but for now I'm just going to work a tree on every other post, and then we'll do something fun different down here. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is little Bouillon flowers here in yellow, bringing back our complementary color idea, but I want to make center posts for them, so I'm just going to do 2 size 8 seed beads. And I'm just using purple thread to match the background. So again, you just scoot the beads down and then put the needle down through the back. And I think on these, I'm going to go through them twice. And then I want them to stay pretty stable on the fabric, so right in between the beads I'm going to come up and then back down over the thread that's holding the beads. And that will keep them just laying flat and perfect. So do that on each alternate post. Okay, so the Bouillon stitch. This can be a little challenging, so it takes a little bit of practice, but we'll break it down really slow. So on the right side of the Cretan stitch, about halfway up, I'm exiting out with my needle. Then on top of the beads, about 1/8 of an inch and just to the right, so it's almost in the middle, you're going to come through and then exit your needle out that same space as you went into, but try not to pierce those fibers. Before you pull the needle through, you're going to wrap it 6 times. So I have 3 strands of DMC floss here. It's really effective in silk and anything that's got strands because it's got a lot of spirals. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I'm not wrapping it really tight, just taut. And so before you pull the needle, you want to make sure you hold all those wraps with your thumb and your finger on the back, and then just pull the needle through really slowly. And as soon as you feel that resistance, what I'll do is I'll just put it on my surface. I'll hold those stitches in place, smooth them out a little bit, and then just give it a little pull. And then those little spirals will surround that bead. And then you just put the needle right back in to that same spot. And then just work it on the other side. So we'll do it again. So now this time I'm on the right side of the Cretan spoke there. And just on the side of that other one. So not in the same hole, but really, really close. And then come out your same hole without splitting your fibers. So a lot of times I'll just hold them out of the way and come out. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, not really tight, just taut. Slide the needle, hold all the stitches in place. And a lot of times you can just kind of play with this and make sure that your stitches are going to be even on there. fluff them up a little bit with your needle, just really gently. And then insert the needle back down into that same spot. Okay, so just work those all the way on those beaded centers. Okay, and then I thought these fellows needed just something a little extra, so I just did a 3-stitch stem stitch on either side. So what that looks like is sort of above the middle point of those 2 beads, just barely above. Exit your needle about 1/8 of an inch away. And then we're going to do a little curved stem stitch right down to the base here. So insert your needle and come up at the halfway point. Make sure that your thread is on the outside of where you're working. So one, then another tiny one right here, just along the line that you want to make. And then come out in the same place as your last stitch. 2, 3. Now we could just put it down here, but what will happen is that thread might angle here and you won't get that curve. So we are going to make that last little curve. And when you keep the thread to the outside, it'll just curve right along with the needle. And then at that point here, you can just insert your needle back down in, right where the Cretan stitch V happens. Okay, then same thing on the other side. So I'm going to work that all the way across, and then I'm kind of obsessed with these little orangey beads. They've got pink and orange and great colors. I don't know if that shows up well on camera, but I think I will top these little arms with those orange beads, and then something on the top here, some bead or some cluster, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, so I made a few little changes and additions. I did the same technique that I just showed here, but I took it out because the thread was just too thick and it was competing with the Bouillon stitch. So with one strand of DMC floss, I just made these little stem stitch arms, branches. And then I added beads to the top. These are size 12 seed beads, just 3 up here, 1 on each little branch, and then a little pyramid coming down. And I think that is good. I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll work down here into the green, and maybe we'll do some pinks and reds, some complementary colors to the green while adding maybe a little flower garden. So all we're gonna do is just come down from these things, and I'm just gonna make a line so that I'm consistent. I'm just gonna take my chalk pencil, make a light line so I have a reference to end. And then with 3 strands of DMC floss, and I'm knotting it at the end, I am just going to put in on every single one here a fly stitch. But I'm going to come halfway between the line I drew previously and this line. So just 1 fly stitch. And I'm going to come right up on the dot. And stab it right into the Cretan stitch ending there. Okay, so I'm just eyeing this part up and just trying to stay evenly, have this Cretan stitch stay evenly centered. Okay, so work that on every Cretan stitch end. And then on the sides, just make a little half mark there. So surrounding that, what I want to do is make a lazy daisy. So I'm going to come up through the same point as this line, go down in the same place, and then come up in the top of the stitch there. Slowly pull it so it surrounds that line. Just finish out the lazy daisy by popping that right into the top there. And then when you hit a full fly stitch, same thing. Just over the loop. And in the center, let's make an extended one that goes all the way up to the line that we just drew. And then I think on the top of this one, I'm going to put on a bead, green bead, just a little bit brighter on the green there. Just push the bead down with your needle and then enter the fabric just above it. And then surround this end of the fly stitch. Here. Okay, and then you can put a little half guy up on the sides if you want to. So I'm kind of playing with bringing some yellow down into the green. More is more is more on crazy embroidery, crazy patch embroidery. So what I'm trying to do is just get this yellow up in between these two lazy daisies, this center one and the left one, and then insert it just on the other side, and then come up just under the bead. Come up through the bead again, pull it until the loop just fits, and then just stab it on the other side, and that'll keep that bead facing up too. Make another fly stitch right on top of the whole thing. And come up just at the base of that center lazy daisy. Putting on a purple size 8 seed bead. And incidentally, the pink and this yellow are both size 8 pearl cotton. And then just come down at the base on that Cretan stitch. Then come up again through the bead on the other side. And I just decided to take that yellow line to the seam line. Okay, so I'm going to do that on every flower. And here I'll just work some sort of half. Let's see what that'll look like. Actually, you know what? I think you can just work the whole centerpiece. Up through that bead again. And then instead of a fly stitch, we'll just work one stitch coming down. That way, even though that's going to be on the 1/4 inch seam, we've still got a little bit of yellow on that side. And then the other thing that I was thinking would be fun, just to bring some more red in, is in the center of that Lazy Daisy. This is 2 strands of DMC floss. I'm just going to fill it with a red line. And then I think I'm going to just do maybe each tree 5 random French knot berries. So 1, 2, 3, just little ones for a little spark of color along that purple. I love red and purple together. And you can work, I'm just going to do 5. I love things in odd number. But you can work them inside the tree, on the branches. 2, 3. More is more is more. Okay, I think the last thing I want to do to this guy is get some aqua in here. So I am just going to run a series of feather stitches. And I'm not going to use precision on this. I'm just going to run just a few stitches. Kind of looks like little branches. Now on the feather stitch, you can alternate sides, or you can just keep going on the same side. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll try to come parallel to where I just came out of. And down a little bit. And then maybe we'll go to this side. A feather stitch feels like kind of a chain stitch, only it's just worked open. Maybe I'll just attach that down here. Start around this side. Just making sure that your thread is underneath. So I'm just going to do one stem in whatever direction I feel like needs to fill some space in between each flower, and then just end it in between. And then I think the last thing, just bringing this color back into the purple. I have these cool little metal flat beads. I think they'd be pretty on top of these flowers. Go back to this purple bead that matches here, and so just to hold it in place, I'm just putting a bead on and then going through that hole again. And then I'll maybe just work 2 French knots coming right up the center. I'll make them a little bit bigger this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is 2 strands of DMC I'm working with. I usually like to pull the knot first, hold it in place, and then bring it through, and I'll do one more on top of that one. Maybe 1/8 of an inch away or so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thread goes under, go right next to it, pull it, And then those knots sort of line up with that one bead, so it'll be every other bead that they line up with. And then I think I'm going to call this one good. And so I'm going to put this in my journal, and that way if I ever need a design idea or some seaming idea, I can always look back in my journal and find what I've done before, and maybe just a reminder of things that I like, things that I think might work for whatever project I'm working on. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Keep sending in your photos. We've gotten some amazing photos in, so I will leave you with a little slideshow of what has come in this week. And next week we are going to combine stitching and applique and do an embellished sashiko block. Thanks again. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.